Hey, what's going on, everybody? JT here. We've got C Will, we've got David. This is episode 55 of The Next Block, and today we have a fantastic guest. We have Gary Malouf, who is the VP of Engineering at Algorand Inc. Super excited to bring you guys this episode. If you haven't done so already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit us up in the chats with any comments, questions, topic ideas, whatever you want to do. But thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us on our program, Gary. How you doing?
Hey JT, guys, super pumped to be here. Big fans of all of you. So just really excited to get in.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that. Honestly,
welcome.
that absolutely, that's great to hear. And before we start, sometimes I forget to do this, but big shout out to Non-Fungible Domains for sponsoring the podcast. Go get your .algo wallet address if you haven't done so already. They're a great part of the community. But let's take it from the top, I suppose. What does the VP of Engineering do? Like, what's the role of VP Engineering at Algorand?
So myself, I'm personally responsible for all the development on the core protocol of Algorand. And what does that mean? That's our consensus function. That's the node software that goes out. The consensus upgrades that you hear about a few times a year. We have one coming up in the next few weeks that we're getting prepped up. Some of the core libraries that people integrate with. We work closely with the folks at the foundation when they launched AlgoKit. A lot of the core libraries behind that are built by our team. So, we're the word in a short word, it's tech. It's making sure that all the tech works, that all the core support's needed for this blockchain. We're thinking about we're looking at the health of the network, talking to folks that key runners in the world. Hey, how are you? What's your experience like? What can we do better? It's everything along those lines.
That's a great high-level overview. I suppose we should dive a little bit and pick that apart. So, there's a lot of different aspects, and I know people get confused on what the Algorand Inc. side of things does, or what the Algorand Foundation side of things does, and then, of course, the third-party ecosystem builders. So, what differentiates between? Because, of course, Algo Foundation, as you mentioned, is working on the Algo Kit, or has at least unveiled that. So, you would think that would fall on the tech side of things under the Algorand Foundation. So, I suppose what's the differentiating factor between those two, and are the lines sometimes blurred there?
Yes, the short answer is the lines blur in some cases. The high 10,000-foot view is the core protocol is what we've been responsible for, and making sure that that's not going to break and it's reliable. Now we're thinking about consensus, and the foundation is really focused on developer enablement and growing that ecosystem. Right? How do we invest in projects? How do we help the folks that come to us saying they're trying to launch, and what do they need? They're on that very front line, listening to folks say, hey, these are the things that work well. These are the things I need more of. And AlgoKit was a great way for them to answer that directly, right? And not have to act as like a buffer layer. John and the team are fantastic. We love talking and working with them. That's kind of where the line is, like from the very front facing tools on what developers use. You're going to the foundation in terms of how does this network work? You're coming to us. That's where the fine line is, and there is gray area, of course, because many of our libraries are incorporated into AlgoKit. But there again, I give the other thing is the dev relations team, which doesn't get seen a lot. They are everywhere in terms of how do you build this ecosystem up. They're working in almost on all the major countries in the world, and that gives it's perfect for them to have a direct say there.
By libraries, can you expand on that a little bit more for the non-developers?
Oh, of course. So we have software development kits, or SDKs, that you might have heard out in other ecosystems in several different languages, in Java, in JavaScript, in Python, in Go. And those are because they're so explicitly tied to how does the protocol act and behave and integrate, we maintain those as a user friendliness option for the broader ecosystem. Folks can call an API directly on an algo node, but it's much nicer to have like a kit that you just call functions on directly from a developer's perspective. And I understand that we have a contingency that's not developers, so that line can seem gray when we're just talking like this. But I would say SDKs are the building blocks for how you build applications, and so we want to provide those building blocks as much as we can.
Nice. One question I would have, just from your perspective, and obviously, your tenure there with the Algorand Inc. The past year or two, you guys have had some major upgrades to the network and stuff like that, where do you see Algorand's network in relation to, a lot of these other layer one chains that are, obviously jockeying and trying to fight Ethereum for market share, and really just from a technical standpoint, why Algorand does actually stand out among a lot of other chains, in your opinion?
I mean, we've talked about, I think ad nauseum, our consensus algorithm gets talked about all the time. That's one. Our performance, we actually, in a way, underpromised this. And like, as silly as this sounds, like we said, okay, we support 6,000 transactions per second. We had a 50,000 transaction block at the beginning in January, multiple of them. And that was by somebody unconnected to the Inc. or the foundation that just wanted to show, hey, I can hammer swaps home. They were hitting 10 to 12,000 transactions per second without breaking a sweat. And so for a long time, I think we focused a lot on performance, and because that's what we talked about at Decipher and whatnot. And obviously Ethereum isn't in that same realm, and a lot of other chains are. Some of them are there, some of them are making up their definition of what a transaction is without saying any explicit names. Like that's actually one of my biggest problems with all these comparison tools, is that hey, you're counting consensus messages, which we do probably 5 to 1 on transactions at any given time, and we don't count those at all. You throw that on, all of a sudden our TPS looks huge, but it's like let's agree on what a transaction is across chains, and let's actually have a standard benchmark. I'd love that. So you were talking about advanced the last year or so, David. What I would say is we've done performance for a long time. We're shrinking round times. This upcoming release, we're going to be shrinking another 400 milliseconds off of the round times, which I don't know if that sounds like a lot or not to you folks, but it's a big difference in user experience. It's getting down to around 3.3 seconds. When we were talking a year ago, we would have been talking 4.2 to 4.4. So that's actually a big difference, because it's really not any slower than using a Web 2 application at this point. It's basically the same, or sometimes in many cases better experience, bluntly. And it's fine. You're instantly final, which I don't know. The other thing, I went and did a whole push a month ago on all these other chains. Trying to get their definition of finality is a real challenge. All I know is when we say a block is done, it's done. There's no what ifs. What if there's this 1%, half of a percent chance that things go wrong and we have to roll. There's none of that. When we write a block, it's done. And I think instant finality, everyone claims it. And there's another one where that's not, for most of these chains, it's not accurate. And they have all these small, and I can tell you that because we have folks that are looking at different layer 2 solutions. And when you go and try to build a bridge between us and one of these other blockchains, we can't actually be final for something like 20 hours or 40 hours, even though that they say they're final in 3 seconds.
Okay, can we talk about that a little bit more? Finality, right? So we mean when a transaction goes through, there is no reverting of this transaction. Are we saying
there's no rollback?
Yeah, a chain that says, well, you said about 20 hours, they can roll that back?
There is a theoretical chance, and they would say it's theoretical, but there's a non-zero chance that because some part of their infrastructure does not meet the needs to say that this is final, and they have to roll it back. That's what it means. And there's several of them. I want to be really cautious about.
Yeah, you don't have to name no one. No chain.
Happy to send you guys some docs after the call, I'll be honest. But I repeatedly see it where the marketing says one thing, and then you go and read their own developer portals, and it says something. And you know how you go and look at the integrations, and you see completely different information. And I think that's unfortunate. Our integration is pretty straightforward. If when a block's written, it's written, and that's it. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it.
Yeah. And I feel like, this space, obviously being in it now for a little over 2 years, I feel like it's going to be a race to the fastest, the cheapest, and the easiest user interface. Those are going to win. I mean, we look at other technological spaces of phones or whatever you have it, like technology is expensive at the start, but then it gets cheaper as it gets easier. Right. And so like why, it still kind of baffles me though, that we're at a space where the newer tech and the better tech is here, yet people still don't really seem to use it or want to use it, right? I mean, we're watching people going crazy on Pepe right now, and they're paying $20, $30, $40 in gas fees to buy $100 worth of this coin in hopes of it mooning. But then it just the slowness and the expensiveness. Like I took $200. This isn't Pepe related. I took $200 like maybe 3 weeks ago to try out this new sync swap stuff, this zero knowledge proof stuff that's on layer 2s within Ethereum. I took $200 from Coinbase, and by the time I got it there and added some ETH and another token to liquidity pool, I had $140 left. So I spent $60 in fees, right, to get to that liquidity pool. And it's just like, you look at Algorand, what Algorand can do, and I even look at some other layer 1 blockchains that are similar, I would say, in Algorand, or racing kind of alongside, and you can do so much more. But why aren't people flocking to this? You know, what's your thoughts there?
I have a lot of thoughts here. First, there's folks have. I mean, we were talking about Tulip Mania just as we were going live, right? And there's a chunk of that goes on, and I think that's actually the most damaging thing that happens in crypto. And that doesn't mean someone can't get rich off of it, but it also means a whole lot of people are going to lose. And I ultimately don't. I think long term that part's going to shake out. In terms of the actual technology solutions and why is one working and one's not, we have to meet Web 2. We're so focused sometimes on all the cool things Web 3 enables that we forget that we have to make things as easy as possible for folks in Web 2 that are there, or even Web 1. Like, I've got grandparents and my daughter's grandparents. Like, using the iPhone is a huge deal, right? And so I think the people that end up winning are going to build great businesses that just so happen to use a blockchain because of its valuable properties. And there's a few of these on Algorand that I'm pretty excited about, which we could talk about in a little bit. But they build a great business, period, and they make it as user-friendly as possible. And then they're using the great properties that a chain like Algorand provides in order to make the business, to solidify the business. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Now, right there, I just want to stop you for a second, because we've also asked Jess from the Algorand Foundation, because we kind of had this conversation about all these big companies, right, in the Web 2 world that are starting to leverage or use blockchain to make an NFT or, some type of thing. But then she would kind of come out and say, these are just paid deals. These are paid things. There's no real meat behind them. I would even say there's plenty of people on Twitter who, would kind of say that some of the Algorand partnerships and things that have partnered with Algorand haven't really come to fruition and really shown fruit, right, in network activity and really adoption. Why is that? Kind of where are we at in that phase in your mind?
I think she's not wrong about the paid deals. And we can look at any number of them. Because when you see some of these chains that just launched literally a month ago and they have deals already with MasterCard, think twice about that. Like, somebody handed someone else a big pot of money, right? And let's just be honest about that. And I'm not going to say we never did that in our years of experience, but I'm saying I don't think that's going to ultimately be the solution. I think it's going to build great business. I look at folks like Lofty, like Travelex, like AgroToken as those are examples, but what I like, the pattern that I like, is that they're building a great business and they use the properties of a blockchain that they cannot get otherwise in order to solidify it. And that doesn't mean we're not going to have a great DeFi ecosystem or you go to NFTs. But when you go back, I think when you want big mass adoption, it's going to be what we call Web 2 businesses that have found out that blockchains are incredibly valuable. And you hide the my mom cannot worry about keeping her private key safe, right? I'll be honest. We have to come up with a great solution to that. And I don't know if those are there yet. We're getting there as an overall ecosystem. I took my Algorand hat off for about a minute.
Yep. Crypto in general.
Ecosystem. I don't think we've solved that at all. I think our answer is not your keys, not your crypto, which works for me because that's how I protect my finances. And I tell everyone who wants to keep any significant crypto safe, that's what you have to do. But I don't think that works for folks that are not as Web3 literate. And I got news for all of us. That's probably 99% of the world.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I want mass adoption because I think the benefits of crypto and decentralization are gigantic, but we've got to meet them in the middle, and we're not yet. We're making steps. I'm excited about these early businesses, but we've got to keep going. And you're right, David, like a lot what Jess said earlier with, I guess you guys looked at her at Consensus. She's right. Paid stuff is not going to do it. It's that's just marketing and branding.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like right now, people, if you want your project to thrive, the biggest thing right now that you want Binance to list, right? You want the biggest exchange to list your token so that you get the mass appeal. It's not even really that it adds any value. It's just, it adds viewership and people access to it. I definitely obviously have the last 6 months been researching, doing more in depth, not just reading about what blockchains are doing, but actually using them, right? Trying to see how these layer twos on Ether, are they really making big strides? To me, I don't really think so. Looking at some of the other chains like Near, I've tested that one, Cosmos, and moved funds around. Still, and even another one I feel like it's kind of gotten traction from some of the VCs and people who were promoting and kind of building on Algorand early, which is Moonbeam and Polkadot, and trying to that ecosystem. But there's some cool things with governance and whatnot, but token finality and transactions, like it's still not on par with where I would say Algorand currently is. And obviously, you said earlier you guys have a lot of updates coming. I'd be excited to hear, what are you most excited about for 2023 with the upgrades that are coming to Algorand?
So let me talk about our near-term stuff and then longer term where I think we're going. Because that will sound a little different than historically, right? I think for a long time we've talked about building out our smart contract platform, which we're pretty proud of. That it's robust at this point, and that's not where we were 3 years ago. It's robust today. It's very robust. We've talked about performance and scale, and we feel good about where that is and where it's heading. Like that's history, and we talked about interoperability, and those are still important, and they will continue to be. And this upgrade, we have actually, I talked about the 400 millisecond drop. We're pretty excited about shrinking round times again. We have group resource sharing on application calls. Again, these are things that are developer focused, so I don't expect them to resonate with the majority of the system, the majority of the ecosystem. But I want to make the point that we are not leaving developers behind, and every step we're thinking about them. So basically, access to apps, assets can share resources during smart contract evaluation in a transaction group. That's a huge deal in terms of building different applications and making it so much easier. Giving folks the ability to test their apps even quicker by manipulating timestamps. We're making our state-proof chain much more robust. So even if it were to ever fall behind, it can catch up basically in a touchless way. I don't even have to think about it. That's all coming in the next few weeks. Longer term is what I'm even more excited about, and I think this is going to be a long-term discussion with the community, the foundation, everybody involved. We're taking a hard look at our current incentive structures. Consensus jumps to mind, as you've got to, like, we historically we have not incentivized consensus. That's something that we're going to be looking at over time. We think it's important. We had different reasons why we didn't do it at launch, good reasons, bluntly. But we're going to take a hard look at that this year. And that's an ongoing conversation with the ecosystem. We're looking at more and more developer experiences in terms of debugging tools, in terms of making AlgoKit the rich, robust face that you see on other systems. In terms of performance and scale, I think we touched on this a little earlier. I want to see more standardized benchmarks. We are going to propose something on that front later this year, and try to work with we've been actually talking to folks at other blockchains about this and try to get some kind of benchmark on that, because we think it's important, and it will put some of the marketing nonsense that we see all the time that we all fall for to the side if we can do that. Pretty excited about that stuff. And the other biggest one I would say is decentralization. We have steps on the way to get there. Historically, like, this is one of the things I think Ethereum has done well. I think you pay for it by paying ridiculous gas fees, and you pay and not having any performance, and end up with all these layer 2 solutions that are, hey, how does this all mix and match together? And we're all still guessing at that with all the tokens and products launched around that. We're taking a hard look at something like a peer-to-peer type network. It's something we historically have not done, but having that there is something really interesting. Imagining a world where we use something called relays in order to have really fast transaction processing in our network. We're looking at making those an optional component. Basically, hey, if I need a fast path for specific types of transactions, maybe my transaction goes through a relay. If I want to really promote decentralization, hey, my nodes are gossiping to others like we want it to, and there's no centralized dependency. There's no dependency on the foundation or anybody else who happens to run a relay. So we're pretty excited about that stuff. The other thing is, even when we do have relays, making them really cheap to run. They're not the cheapest thing today in terms of they need a 3 terabyte drive at the moment. We're going to have that down to a couple gigs in the next few months. So pretty excited about that. But there's a lot, and we're trying to be thoughtful about what we do and don't do. Again, I'm on the core protocol, so picking our spots is crucial. I think incentives and decentralization out of that group really jump to mind as we've got to make progress on this year. The other thing I'd say is from an incentive structure is sustainability of the chain, and how long-term are we going to incentivize development where we're not looking for just, okay, live with tokens and watch them go up and up and up or something, but how do we, like, what is the right fee structure? How do we make it so it's worthwhile to develop Algorand itself? And there's not just the Inc. developing it over time. It may be whether it's other entities or other independent foundations. So we're looking at the long-term sustainability of this thing. Like we think in increments of 5 to 10 years.
Well, thank you. I have a few, I guess, follow-ups there to kind of expand on. When I'm thinking of, so like I was studying like Ethereum, they had the Shambhala upgrade and all that. Like, how does these upgrades work when the chain is like fully live? Like, how does it integrate all of these new things that you mentioned? How does that go into the chain without affecting the development that's currently on there?
Great question. So what we do is we have something called a consensus upgrade in Algorand, which it means is our team builds and releases new software. Node runners, as they see fit, choose to adopt it. And what the software will do is start a voting mechanism. Once the newer software starts running, it will start a voting mechanism. I want to make sure I'm answering your question, Sewell. Is the question, how do we test to make sure that we're not breaking existing apps, or how do we do our upgrades?
Kind of both, because Ethereum, sometimes it seems like they have little issues, and I'm basing that as a standard.
I could talk about our process is before we ever release any library, we do what we call a full catch up of the network, of all of our major networks, which is mainnet, which everyone's, that's where the money is. Yep. Our test net, which is where all of the apps go before they choose to launch. Like that's apps like on their road to going live is they announce they're on testnet. And testnet's actually where you get the most robust testing because people are trying all kinds of crazy things. And you see some high volume, you see all kinds of things there, and betanet. And what we do is we do a full rebuild. We start up a node with the new software, and we basically rebuild the state of the chain on that node all the way up. And you're watching for errors, you're watching for anything like that. That's one. Number two, we go through different versions of the AVM and smart contracts that are written to the different versions and run it against the software. That's a pretty big one. For key changes on the AVM, we'll also get audits done as well, where we think it's sensitive and that the auditor can add a significant value. So the testing is pretty robust. I mean, before we even merge, we have pretty high levels of automated testing that we try to think through cases. We talk to the community on a lot of features. This is in our Discord and our Reddit. It's pretty major. There's a pretty robust back and forth between builders and us on those fronts. Even now with the current release, which is exciting. So that's how in terms of testing and making sure things work. In terms of actually releasing, I'll hit this really quick just to not burn any more time. You get the new software out there. As people choose to launch it, it starts a decentralized voting mechanism. And basically when 90% of online stake or participating in consensus stake gets the new software, they will vote to accept the upgrade. And when that does happen, we typically have upgrades set to around 6 days in terms of round time, in terms of number of rounds. And after 6 days, the new features take effect. Basically, there's what we call feature flags that are holding back the new features from being available until that point hits. Sorry, I know that's a lot of tech babble, but just wanted to.
Oh, thank you. It makes a lot of sense. JT, you got something?
Yeah, actually, kind of want to build on that because you jogged something in my brain that has me thinking. I know this isn't really anything to do with what you do per se, but is there any deliberation inside about naming these upgrades or like branding them in a certain way? Because we have like AVM upgrade, like 1 point, whatever, whatever it might be. It doesn't really draw that much attention or it doesn't really get that much notice, but other chains, they brand their upgrades. So that way it gets a little bit more, media attention, whether in Cointelegraph or CoinDesk, write-ups about it. And, like I said, I know you're not marketing within it, but I didn't know if there's any sort of conversation about maybe making those upgrades seem a little bit more exciting, I suppose.
So my background, before I got into crypto, I was pretty heavy in ad technology. And so 12 plus years supporting that. So I have some marketing sense. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's something we're talking about with the foundation and our own marketing team here at the Inc. There's good and bad things to that. Like, for example, if you name something, it to be pretty, you want it to be pretty major, right? Otherwise people just start ignoring your upgrade. So we have to make sure that when we are naming that it's significant and interesting to the general public, I think is important. It's a fair criticism. I've heard it some, and let me say we're talking about it. So it's not a no, it's more of a let's see what we can do. It's not a bad idea.
Right.
Yeah. Some,
I
obviously
get disappointed in some of them because I've seen some of the upgrades on other chains, and it's like they have this some awesome name like Archimedes, and then
Right.
like
It's
slipped a few bits.
a tightrope
Good
to
names,
walk where you
though.
don't want to almost over promise with a too exciting of a name, and then it's just like an upgrade that nobody really notices too big of a difference on.
I mean, it's a fair point to bring up because we're trying to strike the right balance between, hey, we're credible when we speak, and we also know that marketing matters. Like people want to be excited, and so I hear your feedback. I'll follow up. I'll say that.
Nice. One thing, obviously, hearing you talk about the upgrades coming to Algorand, and we've even talked to John Allen Woods and heard some of the things about how to further decentralize and interoperability, because it seems at the moment that Algorand is amazing, but it's kind of in a walled garden, right? It's kind of hard to really get that liquidity and get those people to be able to move over and bridge to Algorand. and it's kind of a twofold question, but with state proofs, you mentioned that's that was a big, what a lot of people in the Algorand community saw as a big upgrade. Like, how does that tech, is it the London Bridge and stuff like that, but how does it actually get accepted by other chains to actually show that state proofs that technology that was created is actually better than the current bridging stuff that we see in the space?
Folks like the London Bridge is a good example because I think people can be honest. I think a lot of people don't pay attention to the security implications, and we have to, and that's on us and that's on others to point out what the problems are. How many times do we have to watch these bridges get hacked and taken advantage of before we say enough's enough? I'm excited. Again, separate entity, but the concept is right, which is, the whole idea with state proofs is that we have consensus itself attesting to its state that you can use off chain, right? And it reduces the risk of someone messing with account transactions and account balances and basically misleading the public. So I'm excited about the London Bridge. There are degrees of centralization and decentralization in bridges, and there's several bridges that are connected to Algorand now that we use a set of validators, and there's good and bad things about that in terms of who holds all those keys, right? And we've seen a lot, and that more matches what you see on other chains. I'm interested to see how the London Bridge launches because they're using state proofs. So I think that's something to call out. Is let's watch how that launch goes and see the direction there. There are several bridges that exist today, so I think the walled garden concept might be more you can't lift at the moment outside of Milkameda, which people I think should be taking a look at. You don't lift and shift in the EVM app, which is good and bad. I think there's some weirdness to that too, because if you're just replacing an app everywhere, that seems not the most well thought out thing to be doing.
And then you kind of got, I guess you would get into the debate of the reason why that we in the Algorand ecosystem see the AVM is better than the EVM, right? And like that it's actually better to build new and improved dApps and applications on Algorand, not just bridging the liquidity.
There's a lot of limitations
and everything that's already over
that
there.
You're accepting in order to get that interoperability in terms of performance, so we're trying to strike the right balance there. I think having folks like Milkamade in the ecosystem is great, and that can help strike it. But we're also trying to make it as ridiculously easy as possible to build here between what the foundation's doing and ourselves. And I'm pretty excited about that. I've got numbers like AlgoKit has gotten some massive hits in terms of eyeballs. For example, we had something like we had a couple 100,000 views on the dev portal I saw since March 1st, right? And a lot of that was in India, by the way, something like 80% of it.
Wow.
It makes sense with the hubs going.
What's that?
No, all the hubs going out there, it makes sense.
Yeah, no, and it's really exciting. And look, I can't take any credit for this. All credit goes to the foundation, their dev relations team, their marketing team. But it's nice to see that the overall ecosystem starting to deliver on that promise of, hey, this isn't a single country centric. This is a global network, and I expect us to see a lot of exciting things over the next several months and years ahead.
This might be a random question, a side question. So you said India. Are they developing in English? Is AlgoKit in English or multi-language? How's that work?
That's a great question. I think it started off in English, but I believe they're building multi-language support in there.
Nice.
I would actually defer. I would defer to John and the team to clarify that, but I'd be shocked. I can't imagine they're doing one language. So
Yeah.
Right.
One thing, I kind of a lighthearted question maybe, but I know that the bear market has been tough on a lot of people in the crypto space who want to see not their bags go, but they want to see this technology adopted. They see the power behind what blockchain is, and a lot of people had been crying out and really wanting to see more of Silvio, right? And so, kind of like the past couple months, Silvio came out, and we saw Sean Ford step down. Silvio came out with the post not too later, stepping up, and I'm sure it's easy for you. Obviously you're in the you're in the muck when it comes to Algorand. You're there building every single day, and y'all probably have like Friday meetups with Silvio to hear more from him and hear that confidence. But what's it like?
No.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but what has it been like with Silvio since he's kind of taken what he says in his words a more active role in in not necessarily marketing Algorand? I've seen the videos, but what has changed, I guess, maybe in the last 6 months with this kind of push that he wants to be more, hands-on and really pushing it, I guess.
So not internally, not much. Externally, he's definitely more present than he has been. Internally, he's pretty he's involved. I talked to him multiple times a week. I spent 10 minutes talking to him shortly before this call. We're in the same office together. I should just be transparent.
And you got to get him on our show.
He could have joined.
You got to get him on our
I'll
show.
see what strings I can pull. He's
go grab him right now.
He's got some strong ties and a lot of things he works on. One of the things I really like about Silvio is he is a researcher and innovator first, and he's always thinking about building and what can he build with the tech. And that, there's obviously, look, when you're trying to get him in front of people all the time, that's probably a challenge on that front, but he wants to build constantly. He's thinking about how can I build, what kind of creative solutions can I build on top of Algorand, whether directly or talking or inspiring other folks to do it. And he's constantly on it. The dude's work ethic is incredible. You hear from him 7 days, you hear from him all the time. So if there was ever any question of engagement, I understand on Twitter, that's specifically the case that comes up at times, but the dude is constantly investing in how do I make this Algorand ecosystem successful. He said, whether it's useful for businesses, whether for countries. I mean, he's done some amazing work in Italy already in terms of adoption, and they love it. Frankly, they love him in the EU. So he's doing his part. I'm glad. I think you'll see him more, David, is the short answer. I think you'll continue to see him in some key spots. He does tend to pick his spots, but he cares deeply. I don't think you're going to see him on Twitter constantly, and I just
probably not.
Yeah, and I don't even think that would be it. I feel like it's you see the blockchains in the space right now, and you have Ethereum has its Vitalik, right? Cardano has its Charles Hoskinson. All of them have these leaders, but then you look at Algorand. I honestly don't know how many people really would attribute. Oh, Silvio Micali is the founder and creator of Algorand. And I'm not talking about in the crypto the people who are still here building. I'm talking about in the grand scheme of things. If you just talk to a random person that maybe knows a little bit about crypto, they might know, they've heard of Vitalik, right? And I feel like these people are so prominent in pushing their product, and maybe there's a good thing and a bad thing there. Maybe I feel like Silvio Micali takes a more humble approach. I definitely sense that from him, especially in interviews that I've seen from, with Lex Friedman and whatnot. But I do enjoy the Facebook thing, or not the Facebook, the little the Twitter infographics of him kind of talking more about his background and stuff and why he chose to create Algorand. I think that's good, because I feel like even in the Lex Friedman podcast, where he kind of said a project needs that leader at the start, but then they can kind of step away. I'm like Silvio, we want you now. We want you we want to put you at the front. We're all going to get behind you. And then once we've got that fully decentralized community and we can fully grow, then I think Algorand becomes that unstoppable force.
I think you're touching on a little bit of it, which is, I think he's hesitant to be, he doesn't want to be, Algorand he's worried the algo token is going to have his face on it, I think. And I don't think that's what he wants to do, right? I think he wants to build, it should be a decentralized ecosystem. And I think he tries to avoid that. And some of these chains, you're right, there's just like a single person, and I kind of wonder what will happen if that single person isn't their day to day. And
Yeah.
that, you know, that's, and like, so that's why our ethos is supposed to be decentralization in the crypto world, and especially on Algorand, but in crypto in general. And yet I constantly see people like nudging for centralized solutions.
Right. Yeah, I kind of, you know, going back on that topic, I kind of see Vitalik and Charles being sort of the Achilles heels, so to speak, because people do associate them with the leaders of this chain. And if they were to decide to do something different, you know, what would happen to the chain? What would happen to the confidence in the chain? I mean, realistically, the tech would still exist and the chain would be fine, but in people's psyches, if they think the leader is leaving, I mean, that wouldn't bode well. So I actually do agree that I think in the long run, it's probably for the best that we don't have just like a leader, especially if the ethos is decentralization.
I think we're all of us are online, are constantly online. Like, you know, how many times do any of us check our phone a day? And it's our intention.
Too much.
Our attention spans are like
hour
shrinking by the hour. I do everything I can to keep my daughter off these things for this reason. And, you know, my worry is that when we try to think long term, that's the patience is hard to pull from people than it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And so there's a balance obviously to be struck, but we're very much, we want it now. And I think that's some of this.
You're telling us we're the ones with an hour-long podcast trying to
hour-long's not
trying to figure it out.
I don't think you can dive in with anything short.
Yeah, TikTok. Yeah, but TikTok has ruined it. Like, you know, people, it's hard to keep people that actually want to learn about something, not just see it, like, you know, and chase it, but like actually learn and like realize like what's going on deep. So that's what, you know, obviously we enjoy having guests who like to go the extra deep and, you know, into stuff like that.
Hey, so do y'all mind if we hit some of these questions?
Yeah,
let's go for it.
Kind of
not at all.
Rapid fire through them, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go through. I started some over here, and if it gets a little loud over here, sorry. Landscapers literally just started outside, so occasionally you might hear some humming. But on that note, so
good.
I actually don't know what this is, but everyday Algonaut's tuning in. How you doing? He shows up on every episode. We appreciate that. Any estimate when group resource sharing will go to mainnet? And if you do know what he's referring to here, could you elaborate a little deeper on what this is?
Yeah, group resource sharing was what I was talking about earlier, coming up in the next release. So the short answer, you know, if we're doing rapid fire, the short answer is probably the next 3 to 6 weeks, about max. We haven't nailed down a final date because we have 1 or 2 really important changes we want to get in, and I don't like to tell. When you're doing a blockchain, done versus perfect is a delicate thing. So we're trying, like, you don't get to, there's no quick patch. There's no quick solutions if you get a consensus upgrade wrong. So we want to get it right. But group resource sharing for app calls, basically it gives access to resources during smart contract evaluation that's shared across the transaction group. It's really important for developers. It's ready. It's pretty much ready to go. We have 1 small change we're making to it. Again, next 3 to 6 weeks is the short answer.
Fantastic. All right. So we've got Christian Cassini tuning in. How you doing, Christian? This goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. So reducing block finality dramatically improves user experience. Do you see a future where it's below 1 second?
I see a future where it's dynamic, which means some block round times could be definitely sub 1 second. Others that are heavier blocks might be a little bit long, might be longer than that. Not very long, but I imagine right now all of our round times are pretty much the same or within 200 milliseconds. There's a world where you make that dynamic, and there's very good reasons for that, because you want to make sure you hit consensus and you want to be able to reach people that are further on the points of the network. So I think it'll keep shrinking. When we get to a dynamic, what we call a dynamic round time, you'll probably see more of those, and that's not that's not distant future.
That dynamic round time you're kind of mentioning, do you mean like almost like how we see with Ethereum, where it's like you can choose to pay more for the transaction to go through faster or pay less? Or
I think this would be based on technical ability to hit consensus in a responsible way. So if for example, if we can finalize a block in 3/4 of a second responsibly, then we would do that. Right? Responsibly as in making sure that, you know, that we get the right level, we get the right 80% plus stake approving. You know, that's the key. What we don't want to do is do these really tiny round times, and then folks that are trying to participate can't participate because they're on any transaction whatsoever, just because they happen to be in Japan. So there's a balance. And why it's dynamic is because bluntly, when a block has less transactions, you can move data around faster. It's just kind of naturally the way things work. So it'll probably oscillate a little bit in the future.
All right, so we got a handful more of these questions. I hope you don't mind. So let's see. We've got this one on the topic of, sharding and increasing TPS and things of the sort. So scaling it essentially. So why is sharding not great? So this question's worded a little interestingly, but essentially, sharding, on at least from Silvio's perspective, he said that sharding is kind of not necessarily the way to go for scaling. However, there's been some notable critics in the blockchain space, like Justin Bones. I'm sure you might be aware of him, who believes that it very much so is the way to go, and criticizes chains that haven't decided to go the sharding route. So I'd love for you to touch on that a little bit. I suppose this question is, why is sharding not great? To be able to build some arguments against competitor that says sharding is the solution. That's basically a roundabout way of saying what I just said.
I think it introduces a lot of complexity in sub blocks, and you end up with similar looking shapes of complexity that we have in the Ethereum ecosystem, where there's all these layer two. It's the same. When you go and create a roll up, you're essentially what are you ending up doing? You're creating complexity in order to gain speed. Sharding can help with scale if space was a problem, if space is going to become a problem. But I'd much rather solve it at the consensus level and at the actual core blockchain level. And that's the approach we've taken. And until we see evidence that we're going to hit scaling limits, again, Silvio put out that paper a few years ago where he's like, hey, we can theoretically hit 50,000 plus transactions per second. He's right. And there's nothing stopping it when we have all the room as the need arises. I'd love to see a situation where we actually need a lot more than that to introduce the sharding complexity, because sharding puts you at risk of not hitting your finality when you say you're going to. When we were talking about earlier, some of these sharded solutions have problems with finality, and they're like, hey, we have like 98.9% chance that this is final. So if you're an exchange, what do you do, right? Who's going to take on that risk? You build insurance policies in. So the short answer is, I don't think the complexity and the risk is worth the possible additional scale, especially when you've already got pretty good scale, really good scale for world use cases. So that's the short answer to that.
Makes sense to me. We've got Tony Hong tuning in. How you doing? Question is, how do you see the relay network evolving? We touched on this a little bit before. Will the community be able to start to get involved at some point, running their own relays? And also, I want to add to this question, because this is on a topic of decentralization, which we touched on before, which is actually one of the topics that also has a pretty vague definition. So how does Algorand define decentralization? Because there's no clear standard there either.
For a long time, we've focused on our consensus. We don't know who's going to be proposing the next round. Unlike a lot of other chains, we don't know who's going to be the proposer for a block in the future. We use a verified random function to do it. We've focused on consensus for a long time. Having said that, one of the most common digs we get is, hey, you've got this relay network, and today it's secured. It's locked. Like, the community can't participate. That's not fully true. Community, you can certainly spin up a relay, but getting yourself in, there's SRB records and other things. So what I touched on earlier, what we're doing is we are building towards a peer-to-peer network, which basically you can have one stake node communicate with another, gossip transactions to other stake nodes. Relays will be there because if you want to get a fast path or a happy path, if there's some performance critical solutions that you really need to get, but they'll become an optional component. Today, they're a core part of our system. Again, we didn't view it as a huge thing. We think decentralized consensus is in large part a great step forward. But we are willing to, we're basically not just willing, we think we're going to make these relays optional. The other thing I would point out, to Tony's point, is, hey, how will I be able to run a relay? Well, yeah, because we're going to lower the cost along the way to making them optional. We're also going to make it really cheap to run them. They don't have to be archival nodes anymore and have 3 terabyte disks. Basically, I go and read other chains, and the cost of running a validator node on one of these is kind of insane. Our relays aren't even validators. So we want to make this as cheap and efficient as possible. I think for a long time, we wanted to make sure there were enough copies of the full chain, but we've got enough scale there that that's less a concern, and there's enough people that will step up and we'll find other ways to incentivize archival nodes that don't have to be relayed, so they don't have to be relays. So in short, we'll make relays cheap, and we're going to also make them optional.
Awesome. Makes sense to me. I start a couple more questions, but it actually looks like Joe Polney, what's going on, Joe, answered some of those. So let's see. We've got Leaks asking another question here. How is Inc. organized and working? Oh, we kind of touched on this as well. So I want to build on this question a little bit too. Is Silvio assuming the role of CEO, or is he just filling a void while you guys temporarily find a new one?
I think Silvio has always had a big say in what direction we're going to go.
Of course.
As majority owner of the Algorand Inc. We have a great, like what I was saying earlier, is not much has changed internally, and I should be more clear on that. Sean was great. We were lucky to have him for the years that we had him, both in his COO role and a CEO role, and he's still an advisor even to us. So I'm a huge Sean fan. But one of the things the team did well while he was here is we put into place in a governing structure that, like, we have an executive team that runs and figures out solutions together and executes on them. There's not a lot of, well, who's saying this? Silvio's in the room when we're doing these decisions. We agree on this is the direction we do it. So we have, Paul Riegel, we announced the hiring of our new CFO. Like, we have plenty of leadership in place. Like, at some point, I'm sure we will have a CEO. But it's not the burning urgency the community might feel it is for us, because we operate pretty well day to day. We know what we want to do, and we go and we align on, hey, if there's any big decisions you made, let's talk, figure out what the right solution is, and go and execute. The other thing I'll point out is I think it would, like, again, the foundation's primary role is building the ecosystem, whereas we're building the tech. So there's a little bit less marketing that we are doing than the foundation, and so I want to be like, that's the other reason we feel a little bit less pressure to hurry this solution out. Doesn't mean we're not going to hire a great CEO or bring nominate however we do it, but we want to find the right. We're trying to make sure we have the right qualities when we make that call. And there's not a real rush there. We feel very confident in what we're doing right now.
Makes sense to me. So we've got 3 more of these questions, and if you have any other questions in the audience, let us know before we wrap up today. But Everyday Algonaut with another question here. What technical solution could solve the semi-centralization of the relay node and central DNS setup?
So we touched on, again, this sort of was touched on earlier when we were talking about making relays optional. That's half of it. The other half is we're actually working on changing how Algorand nodes bootstrap, so it's easier to add your own. Hey, if you want to say I bootstrap off these nodes that are not run by the foundation, that are not sponsored by the foundation or registered with the foundation, you be my guest. You can bootstrap off both of them. So we're making some changes to the nodes to make that a lot easier as well. That'll be more near term than the relay changes. But I think we answered this earlier in terms of the relays are going to eventually become an optional component.
Right. All right. So we've got Kirby tuning in. So he's saying, I recall watching a lecture about Algorand getting its own L2, specifically for expanded contract execution, scaling, etc. Is that still being researched / developed?
Yes. I will say, though, that a lot of the original reasons that we were doing this, we addressed by making the AVM much more powerful. Like we took, we have a guy, John Gennady, that is basically the architect behind the Algorand virtual machine. He spent hours and hours every week with those researchers, and a lot of the features that we said, hey, this has to be in a layer 2, we're like, no, we could do this at layer 1 and reduce the complexity. And one by one, we brought them all into the layer 1 over the last 2.5 years. They're there. We are still looking at this because there's some special types of, when you have large amounts of data to move around, or for example, you want some cross-chain liquidity. So we have a research team that's looking at this among other solutions, but we've brought a lot of those features into the layer 1, and that's why we felt really good.
Makes sense to me. So last question here, at least from the live chats, is from Deshaun. How you doing, Deshaun? What happens if the upper limit of the transactions per second is reached? Of course, this is theoretical because we aren't close to there yet. Will the chain stop, or is it just slowed down, degraded? How does that work?
I think there would just be I think transactions would take longer to execute in that worst case. It wouldn't stop. There's no stall. It's not going to stall by any stretch. And we've done this, like when we do our tests, basically we keep throwing more and more traffic until we start backing the thing up. And we've gotten that. It gets to be pretty big numbers, but like that's how you perform a system. Frankly, that's how other chains do it as well, if they're doing it the right way.
Right.
Well, you know what's cool? I was watching the Fly Boney Travel X tickets, and that one might do it eventually.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited at these businesses that are, hey, their core is not block. They have a great business model, and oh yeah, because
They
of
use
blockchain's unique
blockchain.
policies and it
Yep.
scales like hell, that's why we're using it. And we didn't even notice that they did it, right? It's just fun, right?
Yep.
The billboard, I think the folks behind the billboard did some really, really good experiments in January that they posted about Vestige on Twitter.
Yep.
And those are worth checking out as well. But I feel very comfortable where the scale is right now. Like that part we have delivered on.
Yes, it's dope. So we want to take a quick little commercial break. Give me 30 seconds. If JT, you want to pull this up?
Absolutely no problem here. Just give me 1 second and boom.
Cool. So right now there's an open call for artists. So this is for the Algorand NFT artists. If you're fans of any artist and you want their artwork, or if you're an artist, you want your artwork shown in Lisbon at the non-fungible conference, definitely interact with this post, participate, post a new piece of artwork. Make sure that it's not minted already. And you can read all the rest of the details here on Exa Markets page. Thank you, JT. So non-fungible conference, this contest deadline next Monday on the 10th or something like that, whenever the 10th is. So make sure y'all go interact with this post, share it with your peoples. It's about to be dope. Lisbon.
And for those that are looking for the post, it was tweeted on the 24th of April. So you might have to scroll back on Exa Markets tweet page just to find this one. But yeah, go interact with that post.
Thank you. Commercial break over. Back to you, Gary.
Right. There's one other question I feel like, when I first got into Algorand and was getting excited about the technology, and obviously listening to you, just like every single time I listen to John Allen Woods talk, I get more bullish on Algorand in the future of what we bought into.
John's enthusiasm is
infectious.
It's infectious. That's exactly what I was looking for, right?
Every time.
It's
and
just like
the
when
same
Silvio
way, whether he's
speaks
talking
too.
in an interview or him and I we're talking one-on-one, figuring out some problem. Like the guy brings it. So
talking to him last time, I almost became a developer.
Right. Exactly. He makes you feel like you can like just stop what you're doing and go do it. But when I first got into it, I come from a finance background, right? I was in banking, I was in mortgages. That's
in Pepe now.
I am in Pepe right now, but that's beside the point.
Man, how far have you come?
I mean, right, exactly. But we can talk a little bit about that. But the excitement behind the idea, right now in today's world, we see banks failing, right? We see worries, and we look back to the last global financial crisis, and that's Bitcoin came out of that, right? And obviously it just seems like we're looming on something else that could possibly cause another cause and effect, right? If something happens and then blockchain and whatnot. What I would say is that blockchain gets more adopted. What is your thoughts on finance, like how much finance will actually be used on the blockchain? Like, because that was like the hashtag when I first got into Algorand, was like hashtag future of finance, right? Yep. And so that was my biggest bull case when I would talk to people, like, you could be in Australia, I could be here, and I could get you money in 4 seconds. At the time, I think it was like 6 seconds, but now it's like, under 3 seconds. Like, where is Algorand really I guess, why aren't we seeing more of that, like wanting to, I guess, adopt blockchain technology and really just use it?
I would go to regulation as probably one of the biggest barriers that we should all be honest about that. It's perfectly fine for me to go send Seawill 100 algos or 1,000 algos. It's a totally different thing when I want to be able to send 1,000 USDC to my Bank of America, to my buddy's Bank of America account or equivalent, right? It's one in the end, in order for them to do a lot of the things that they do today, and this goes back to the start of our conversation with how do we come to web? How do we meet people in the middle or even bring it to folks? Is that a lot of things they do? They've got credit cards. They go and buy their groceries on their credit card. Yeah. They connect it to their paycheck goes to their bank account. How do you, people are not going to move to a blockchain yet until we get regulation clarity. I think the EU is starting to do the right thing there. It's early. I don't want to say I'm all excited and then find out it blows in our faces, but starting to see good signs there. I hope to see the same thing here in the U.S. in the coming months and years. I know, I believe there's a bill coming up in Congress that I've seen talked about on Twitter and other places. we got to start somewhere. Right now, it's not a welcoming environment in a lot of places. And when we start making it a little bit more welcoming, we'll see more finance move to it, because it's ridiculous to wait 2 days for money to clear and to show up from one account A to account B. They're moving digits in a computer. It doesn't take that long.
It's
exactly.
basically they have a blockchain that's not a blockchain. Basically, it's just numbers.
Yeah, they're doing some reconciliation.
It's a really
processes during the
badly
day,
distributed ledger instead of
Yes.
one that's well
It's not
connected
even a
and well verified.
Yes.
It's more like sharded. It's actually more like less than great sharded ledgers is how I would put it.
Yeah. So all right. So another funny question. I know we're kind of winding down, and we don't have to get in such deep conversation, deep questions, but I just have a question. It's kind of funny. I made a meme about it, just because we have this
Here we go.
we have this regulatory shadow that's been over the space, and what's a security, what's not a security, and and I'm not trying to ask you what your thought is of algo. Is it a security? Is it not? But was Silvio surprised when Gary Gensler or when algo was dropped? I mean, because you saw the memes, right, of Gary Gensler back in the day talking about how he knows Silvio, he knows Algorand. Like did Silvio, was there anything said like that clown, like what's he saying? like
I think there's plenty, like you're pointing out, David, there's plenty of video evidence of what the
it
situation
just seems
actually is.
crazy.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I was bullish. I was like, "Oh, MIT, Gary Gensler, like, oh, that was like literally."
The other thing I would say is this isn't targeted. I would remind folks that we're not being sued. Nobody like the Inc. is not being sued. We, as in the Inc., as far as I know, is not being sued on this front at all. It was in talk of something else. I agree with the foundation's statement on this.
Yeah.
I think it comes through in my comments already here, but the videos online are quite humorous.
Did Silvio see that?
It's fun to see. By the way, it was fun the days after to see how many people in other communities were pointing out the
right. It was kind of cool
Right.
to see people like actually not some of them were critical in some ways, but like it was interesting to see how many people from bigger communities were defending Algorand and kind of getting behind it, like and poking fun at obviously Gary. I mean, the videos, the music videos, it's just funny. Like it makes me wonder, has Silvio seen that? I know he's probably not on Twitter, but it makes me wonder if he's seen that NFT that as a song that was created, kind of like.
We should have bought that just so we can close out our shows with that song.
I know.
Somebody send me the link and I'll see if I can get it in.
Oh, yeah. If he's not seen it, we got to make sure you get it to him and show it to him. It's hilarious. Like it literally gets me pumped. Like for the last for 4 or 5 days, I was like every morning waking up, that's my alarm. Time to wake up.
Well, that's a fun way to end it.
Yeah.
I do want to leave the floor to you, Gary, because we got a couple minutes left, and I'm not sure if we touched on everything that you wanted to talk about before we leave off. But if there's anything that you want the audience to be aware about, any future upgrades we didn't talk about, or just anything in general, now's the time to let them know. And the floor is yours.
Thanks, JT. I think we hit we do have a consensus upgrade coming up that we'll do a PR campaign on that in the weeks ahead. We're pretty excited. We are shrinking round times again. Again, I feel like that's keeping to and delivering on the promise that we've made. We said in September you would see it over several upgrades, and that's exactly what we're going to see. I'm excited about that front. The other thing I'd point out to our community is just keep a heads up, be productive. Bear markets are tough. I think I had this down if we went into it deep, like how do we build through a bear market? I posted a meme like a year ago when this was starting of Tony Stark hammering away at the iron.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. You just got to, you hammer away. You keep going at it. We are building great tech. I'm excited. Not every project in the ecosystem is going to succeed, but many of them will. And you go and don't judge the overall ecosystem by any single project, good or bad, by the way. And sometimes I think we get into these dark places where we can feed positive sentiment off each other, and we can definitely feed negative sentiment. And I would say, folks, this is a great group that people care. There's a lot of folks in this community that care deeply, and they don't work for the Inc. or the foundation. They're going hard at what they're doing and building their dreams. Support the projects that you find exciting, and let's keep going at it. This bear market will clear up. The other ones have. This one will too, and we will keep moving forward. So
absolutely, I feel like that's a fantastic way to end this one off. We had a couple more questions come through at the end, but we're a little past the hour now. So you're welcome back on the show in the future if you want to answer some more questions. That'd be fantastic. But really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today to answer our questions and the audience's questions.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. This has been a real fun hour.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can also go follow Gary on Twitter. I think it's what you can say your Twitter handle. I don't know it.
At Gary Malouf. Pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
there you go.
Make it really hard. Not, I thought of renaming it not Gary Gensler, but
he's got a nice crazy goose flock as a profile picture, so go follow him, and
Someone
obviously follow all of the people in the Algorand tech team as they are working hard, and we appreciate all the work that you do at the Inc. And obviously we will have you back on the show maybe once this upgrade goes live, so we can talk about it more, and maybe some things that you're seeing as well for the more for the future. Who knows? The space is evolving fast.
I would be
Absolutely.
totally back, guys. Thank you so much.
Yes,
All right,
thank
folks.
you
Smash that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and be sure to tune in next week, because next week we have Sean Lee coming on, who was the previous CEO of the Algorand Foundation. So really excited to talk to him, see what he's been up to, and check out the video description down below for links to non-fungible domains, links to Algorand, links to Gary's page, and everything else. Check it out, and we'll see you all next week.
See you, everybody.